Hi, everyone. Welcome to What's New in Historical Fiction. My name is Colin Mustful. I am the founder and editor of History Through Fiction and the host of this panel. This is a regular panel series where we bring on historical novelists with new and upcoming titles. And I'm really excited about the four panelists we have today. Please go ahead and say hello in the chat. I've disabled your mics so that there are no distractions, but you can turn your cameras on and off. But go ahead and please say hello in the chat. Let us know where you're joining us from, maybe which book you're most excited about, or what historical fiction novel you might be reading right now, anything like that, so we can interact with you there on the chat. I do have a landing page I put together with all of our novelist titles. I'll post that a couple times throughout the chat. Maybe you haven't heard of some of them yet, or maybe you want to learn more. You can go to that landing page, find out all about their books, and it also includes a link to bookshop.org, where you can buy the book. And we support bookshop.org because they give a percentage of sales back to independent booksellers. Without further ado, then, I'm going to remove myself from the screen, and we'll bring on our panelist here. Okay, Madeline, let's start with you. If you could say hello and let us know about your novel.
Hey everyone, Madeline Martin here. So my book is The Secret Book Society. It comes out August 26th, and it basically is about an enigmatic countess who has been widowed 3 times. And yes, there is definitely some talk that maybe she murdered her husbands. And she brings together women to enjoy her very extensive library, women who are having their reading materials suppressed. So it's an opportunity for them to sort of hide behind this banal, womanly, gossipy tea and really kind of have an opportunity to rebel from oppression, have forbidden learning through books, and really just become empowered through one another. It's everything I love about the Victorian era: hat-pin fighting, seances, and floriography. So every plant and flower mentioned in the book is actually done with purpose. So as of August 26th, you are cordially invited to the Secret Book Society.
Thank you, Madeline. I apologize to anyone who was in the waiting room a little bit longer there. There's so many dings coming through, and I'm having trouble keeping up. So we just you only missed a little bit where I just said hello and welcome. All right, let's go to Erika. If you could say hello and let us know about your novel.
Hi, I'm Erika Robuck. I'm from Annapolis, Maryland, and my latest novel that comes out next week is The Last Assignment. This is about intrepid combat correspondent Georgette Dickey Chappelle. There's no one like her. She has hounded me for years, the news hound that she is. I'd stayed away from her story because she covered 7 wars and conflicts in her life, from World War II through Vietnam, and I thought, oh gosh, that's heavy. But she just wouldn't stop. She was relentless. So I eventually gave in and found out that Dickie is such a delight. I'll go anywhere with her. So I kind of compare her to Forrest Gump sometimes. She was absolutely everywhere. You've never heard of her, and you're in good hands when you're with her because she's always a very bright light in a dark place.
Thank you, Erika. Next, Amy, if you could say hello and let us know about your novel.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Amy Lynn Green, and my novel that came out this summer is The Codebreakers' Daughter. Usually write World War II. This one is dual time. So one timeline follows a mother in World War I, in the early days of American code breaking, and her involvement as a code breaker. And then we get to meet her daughter, who is also involved in the behind the scenes of espionage for World War II. Really enjoyed telling this mother-daughter story. The history in it is crazy, and I think we'll get to some of it later, but I love real life characters and getting to put them as characters in the story, and had a great time with research for this one.
Thank you, Amy. And finally, Roseanna, if you could say hello and let us know about your novel.
Absolutely. I'm Rosanna White. I'm coming to you from West Virginia, and I'm talking about The Collector of Burned Books, which is based on the historic library of burned books in Paris that was founded by the exiled writers from Germany in the 30s. So this is about what happened when the library was taken over by the Nazis in 1940, when the Nazis rolled into Paris. So my heroine is Corinne, who is a professor in Paris and has some secrets hidden in this library which she can no longer access. And the hero is Christian Bauer, who is in Nazi uniform, but considers the Nazis an enemy long before the rest of Europe did. And he is supposed to be taking over all the Parisian libraries when really what he wants to do is fight for them.
Thank you, Roseanna. The dings have stopped coming, so that tells me that most of the attendees are here. So if you did miss those introductions, go ahead and say hello in the chat. Let us know where you're joining us from. Also, I'll post the link again to our novelist books. I just posted it there in the chat. If you want to check those out and see the covers and the descriptions, you're welcome to do that at any time. Let's start with Madeline. First, I have to thank Madeline for being so involved with what we do. She's been part of What's New in Historical Fiction a couple times now, and I think she's been on my podcast as well. So thank you, Madeline.
Oh, it's always a pleasure.
Why don't you tell us about the setting for this novel, 1890s Victorian London, and what makes that setting significant for the history that you're telling?
So 1890s is the Victorian era in England, which, and also I forgot to show the book. But basically, in this particular time period, I mean, women really struggled with a lot of oppression that happened. They, really were subjected to what was happening in their homes, like as far as their husbands. Some of these women in this particular book are being oppressed, which is one of the reasons why they get invited into Lady Duxbury's secret book society. But women also were really discouraged from reading in that particular time period. Now, of course, there was always Lady Beeston's book that was really for women's etiquette and how they should behave. But when it came to reading literature, they felt that it took women away from their time that could be spent with their husband or their children. They felt that it was a very selfish endeavor for them to do. They felt that education of one's mind led to promiscuity of the body. And they also felt that women really were not strong enough to be able to sustain the emotional journey that that a novel could take them on. And so it was really discouraged that they actually did read. And this was also a time where women could so easily be accused of being hysterical and sent to lunatic asylums. In fact, one of the biggest inspirations for the Secret Book Society is actually based on a real story that I read when I was doing my research about a man who was having an affair with his wife's niece, and heaven forbid she protested. So he put her in a carriage and sent her to a lunatic asylum to get her out of the way. Well, on the way to the asylum, she happened to see a boy on the street and she gave him some money and said, please take this to my friends and tell them that I'm being taken to a lunatic asylum so that they can come get me out. And he said, well, how will they know it's you? So quick thinking, she takes off her shoe and she throws it through the window. So he goes to the friends and he says, your friend has been taken. Here's her boot. And it's like this anti-Cinderella story. And they're able to find a solicitor who specializes in women who are wrongfully admitted to asylums, and they're able to get her out. So I thought, I mean, the truth is stranger than fiction with these kind of things. So I heard about that and I thought this would be an amazing idea for a book. And so I have this particular story opening up as a prologue with a boy standing in Lady Duxbury's drawing room holding a black kid-skin leather boot with rose embroidery. And he says, your friend has been taken. And then it starts 2 months earlier as the women are invited to the Secret Book Society. So maybe you think you know who's going to the asylum, but maybe you don't.
I have to ask, it's just so shocking. So women were discouraged from reading?
Yes. Yeah. They felt that, well, it gave them these opinions and ideas, and they would be contrary to their husbands and sons and fathers, and how dare they?
Well, yeah, it's just, it's really unfortunate, but I guess I shouldn't be surprised. But that, yeah, it sounds like a really great topic to cover for your novel.
Thank you.
Well, let's go to Erika. Erika's also a return guest on What's New in Historical Fiction. Erika, let's talk about Dickie Chappelle. What inspired you to write a story about her?
I've been working with women in the shadows of history for a long time, and I'd started with women in the shadows of literary figures or women who wrote themselves. And then speaking, and where I live out in Annapolis, so I'm between the Naval Academy, Fort Meade, DC. I have a lot of military and intelligence contacts. A lot in my family have been in various branches of the military. And so I've always had a deep fascination. And I was speaking with an editor one time who encouraged me to find the women who were remarkable in their own right. So not just because they were a Mrs. Hemingway or a Mrs. Fitzgerald. And so it set me on this new mission. And I've been working with women in intelligence and war history. And it was through photographs that I discovered Dickie Chappelle. I couldn't believe she had been involved as a combat correspondent in as many conflicts as she had been. As I said, that was World War II. She did a lot of post-war refugee travel. She was involved in various revolutions, Cuba, Hungary. There were different things in Lebanon and the Dominican Republic, Algeria, Albania. She was all over the place. And then ultimately Laos and South Vietnam. And her story just seemed overwhelming to me. But the more I read about her and the themes and what she was chasing, I became completely obsessed with her. So that's how I ended up with Dickie. And then once I heard her voice, I was listening to an interview with her that I was able to access. And as soon as I turned it on, her voice sounded exactly like my late grandmother, who has been sort of I don't know. I think about her a lot when I write, and she inspires me through her life. And her voice sounded just like Ramsey. It was like this dark, deep, smoker's gravelly voice, and she was so sassy. And I was like, all right, I got this. So that's what led me to Dickie.
And I'm just curious about where the nickname came from, because her given name is Georgette. Is that right?
Yes, so she's Georgette, and her favorite explorer was Admiral Richard Byrd, who's also known as Dick, and he was her absolute hero, and she named herself Dickie after him, and insisted that everybody call her that, and that became how she was known professionally. She'd wanted to be a pilot, but her poor eyesight derailed those plans. So instead, she just jumped out of helicopters into under enemy fire and took pictures of war from the front lines.
Wow. Well, let's go back to Amy. Amy, if you could talk about the mother-daughter relationship in your novel and how that relationship helps you teach us about history.
Yeah, I have always known I've wanted to do a mother-daughter story. I have two daughters, obviously at a different stage of life than Lillian and Dinah, because Dinah is getting ready to start life on her own for the first time, and my daughters are 1 and 3, so they are incapable of even going to the bathroom by themselves. But there were questions around motherhood and identity that I wanted to explore in this book, and I also really enjoyed the ability to dip into both world wars and kind of see what themes were in common with both of them, and how would a character who experienced both of them change in the time in between. It was also inspired a little bit by an interaction that I had with my grandmother-in-law, I suppose is the term. When I wrote my first book, Things We Didn't Say, it was about prisoner of war camps in Minnesota, where I live. And my husband's grandma, who is in her 90s, said, "Oh, when I was a teenager, I worked in a canning factory with Nazi prisoners of war." And no one in the family knew this. They had never heard her tell this story. And we got to chat more about it. And she said, "Oh, yeah, they always told us girls to stay away from those Germans." And all of these details came out. So you think you know someone's story. And in The Codebreaker's daughter, Lillian, who's the mother character, has not told her daughter about her past in code breaking. And why might she not do that? Why did a lot of people of that generation keep quiet about the things that they did in wartime? Did they just not think it was important? Were there deep personal reasons that they might keep that a secret? Was it a matter of national security in some cases? So that idea and then the history that I built in around it was what shaped the format of the mother-daughter story.
That's quite a by the way, pretty shocking to hear. Let's go to Roseanna. If you could tell us about Corinne and Christian, the main characters in your novel, The Collector of Burned Books. What circumstances do they find themselves in, and in what role do they play in history?
Absolutely. So Corinne is a female professor, which in Paris was very unusual. We see them more in England by this time and in America, but not so much in France yet. So she was already an unusual character. She's very bold, very daring. She loves what she loves and is very fearless in pursuing it, which is not a good thing when the Nazis roll into town, because she's not the kind to just sit back. And when they take over her favorite library, which is right next door, um, the Vichy government actually handed this library of burned books over to the Nazis on a silver platter the day that the Nazis rolled in, as a kind of symbol of, here are your enemies, have at them. So she's just determined to do anything she can to help the resistance and to liaison between her students who have fled Paris and are all over France, and her. She has some very distant family involved in espionage in England. So she wants to do anything she can to help fight this invasion. Meanwhile, we have Christian Bauer, who is a German professor, and he was actually inspired by a historical person that I discovered who had always been vocally anti-Nazi from his lecture hall. And he knew that this had been reported, but somehow, though he knew it should have been in his files, they still tagged him and sent him on a diplomatic mission to Italy during the war to make a German translation of Machiavelli. And he used this time to do resistance work, and eventually was arrested. And when they asked him years later, you know, how did you get away with this? He's like, someone had to have altered my files. That's the only thing that makes sense. So this is a different character, but inspired by that sort of story of someone who has always been against the Nazi party, but still got drawn into it and sent on a mission. And in this case, he became what was called the library protector, is the translation of it, which is the person who went to Paris and did the same thing that we know about happening with the artwork. He had to take the really valuable books and send them back to Germany, and note any that were verboten, forbidden, and either mark them or burn them, pull them from the library, shut down any libraries that were just, you know, bad, whether it be because they were the Slavic libraries, the Russian libraries, etc. And basically tell the people of France what they were allowed to read. And as a professor of literature, this goes against everything he believes, but he has secrets of his own that he's protecting, so he doesn't really dare to go too far out of line, because he knows he's got people above watching him and he's got his aide watching him, and if he takes one step that he shouldn't, then he's going to end up in a concentration camp. So he and Corinne end up meeting, and they have a lot in common when it comes to books, but from their perspectives, they're on very opposite sides. So we get to see how they end up fighting together for freedom of thought and freedom of speech and freedom of literature.
That's such a powerful, you know, relationship there that they had to forge. I can't imagine. Well, let's go back to Madeline. So we have history is obviously full of amazing, important events, but a lot of historical fiction these days includes elements of mystery or the speculative or romance or things like that. You've brought in some suspense and mystery, sisterhood into your historical novel. Can you talk about how those elements enhance the story and make history that much more compelling?
Yeah, well, I think that history is incredibly compelling on its own, but I'm just a total history nerd. So, you know, I really wanted to kind of add a mystery into this particular book because I confess, I love thrillers, and I love thrillers that kind of you get to unravel the story as the story kind of goes along. And part of the mystery is, you know, who is going to the lunatic asylum. That's part of it. And then, of course, what's going to be happening after the fact. But part of the mystery itself is also Lady Duxbury. So she is this very enigmatic countess. Now, with this particular time period in history, if somebody really had done something absolutely horrible, like kill their husbands, they would essentially be relegated to the fringes of society. They would be a social pariah. But not Lady Duxbury, because nobody has ever been able to prove that she has killed her husbands. Of course, it's all just sort of gossip. But everybody still invites her places because she never goes. And so it's kind of like, oh, well, will Lady Duxbury attend this particular ball? And there are all these sort of rumors floating around, but nobody actually knows very much about her at all. And so I'm a sucker for when books have like a secret diary and you get to kind of read the juicy little tidbits and details. And so I totally went with that with this particular book where there is a hidden diary that belongs to Lady Duxbury. And as this diary is being read, it helps to reveal a little bit more about this very sort of mysterious character. And so the reader kind of gets to know her and everything that she's been through. But likewise, as far as sisterhood goes, because I really did want this to be a very like women supporting other women type of book. And also, I want to point out that this book is not all men are bad and all women are good. There are bad women and there are good men. So that's definitely a combination of both. But there's so many times that I think that we look at other people's lives, especially with social media, and we think, that person has everything. That person has the perfect life. And in this particular story, every single woman is almost jealous of the other woman for something that they have in their life that they perceive as being absolute perfection. And as the layers start to really peel away, each one of them, who they are at their core and their struggles and what they're going through, is really sort of revealed with one another. And so the women start to help one another and they help empower one another. And I think that's just a beautiful thing.
Yeah, that's great. And important to remember that the grass is not always greener on the other side.
Absolutely.
Erika, I wonder about the importance of photojournalism. There aren't, as far as I know, a lot of novels with that have a photojournalist as the main character. Can you tell us about the importance of Dickey's work and even from that time period in the 60s and 70s to today, and just how valuable that is to have photojournalists going out and sharing this with the world?
Yes, I think pretty early on, Dickey realized that she had an unusual capacity for courage. And that because of that, she had already felt a calling to be sort of the eyes and ears and to go places. When she realized that's not what everyone wants to do, even a lot of her peers were not willing to get certified to jump out of aircraft in under enemy fire in combat on the front lines and try to record it as faithfully as possible. A lot of her peers, especially when she was in Vietnam, would be back at the hotel bar, and they would come when the soldiers would come back in, they would debrief them and then send dispatches. But for Dickey, she wanted to see it herself. She always wanted to eyeball the story. And an early editor told her because she was a woman at that time, she had to be first. And so she kept these as like little rules and things that she had for herself. And she really, when she started, I think with the Red Cross, she had a picture of a soldier who had been just brought onto the ship from Iwo Jima, who was at death's door. I mean, the man looked rough. You can look up the pictures through her archive at the Wisconsin Historical Society. The next day, was meeting with some of the soldiers who had been rehabilitated, and one called her over, and she's like, "Who are you?" And he told her a name, and she realized that was the man she thought had died the night before, and he had received a blood transfusion, and he was resurrected. So she took a picture of both and gave it to the Red Cross, and for decades they used that to get people to donate blood. When she was in Poland after the war, and she saw all these orphan children living in rubble, they were shell shocked, they were afraid. The priest where they lived forced her to take pictures with the flash on, because every time there was a flash of light, the kids would scream. They thought it was a bomb. And he made her do it to show them not every stranger and not every flash of light is going to result in death. And so it helped desensitize them. And then she sent those pictures to the United States, and the Girl Scouts did a clothing and food drive, and they shipped it all over. So she was very action oriented with, I want the pictures that I take to inspire action. When she was in Vietnam, it would inspire care packages. But what she was really trying to do was show the human collateral, the human cost of war, and not just war while it was going on, but then when she was in post-war Europe, it was just rubble for years. They were still rationing, they were still starving people and trying to put their lives back together. And her hope was that she would help inspire people to stop going to war and make the picture to kind of end all wars. Well, she didn't do that. We're still sort of stuck in this endless cycle. But her pictures are really powerful. And the fact that she was willing to risk herself to get them, I think, is what made them so powerful.
Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, it's really amazing, and I think that's to inspire action. I think is such a value that shows the value of it. That it's real. It actually moves people to do the right thing, to help and to do what we can, even if we can't stop the conflict altogether.
Sure. Mhm.
Amy, you talked about Dinah and Lillian, but we also have a historical figure in there, George Fabian. And can you talk about him and the role he played in World War One code breaking?
Oh, there's my inner history nerd is going to come out. Thankfully, we're all history nerds here. This is the part that people can't believe is actual history, is the history of how we had a group of Shakespeare scholars in charge of all of our World War One code breaking for the first year. Um, so basically, George Fabian was a millionaire who didn't know what to do with his money, but unlike most of his peers who spent it on fancy mansions and balls, he wanted to become kind of the center of learning and technology and progress. So he funded studies of sound waves and spinal deformations and fly breeding genetics and all sorts of projects. And one of his projects was he had a group of women who were looking into finding a hidden cipher inside Shakespeare's manuscripts to prove that Shakespeare didn't write his plays. There was one woman in particular who was convinced that there was a code in the original manuscripts and taught all these women to help look for it. That Francis Bacon had secretly put a code in these plays that could tell his life story. Um, Spoiler alert, most serious scholars, including Elizabeth Friedman, the codebreaker who was involved with that, said that that was not actually the case and that Shakespeare did actually write Shakespeare. But when World War One broke out, America was not prepared. They had no military intelligence. They didn't have a background in being able to decipher the more complex codes that came in the era of the radio wave. And so George Fabian said to the US government, hey, I've got an estate with all these scientists and experts, and I have this group of code breakers here. Why don't you just send us your codes if you don't have anyone else to do it? And the military said, okay. And basically, while the different branches of the military were getting their own code breaking departments together, they sent this group of men and women, but there were a lot of women deeply involved in this unit who were the Shakespeare scholars. They just sent them all the codes that were need to be broken for World War One, and there was not a lot of literature on how to do it, not a lot of time because this was all happening so fast. And in the story, George Fabian is a historical character, and so are two of the code breakers who were involved, William and Elizabeth Friedman, a married couple. And when you read interviews with Elizabeth, they keep asking her, like, how did you manage to do this with the few resources that you had? And she kind of dodges the question and eventually just kind of says, we did what we had to do. I can't tell you how we did it. We just had to, and so we figured out. We made our own systems. We made our own way. We all worked together, and we solved these very complex codes and ciphers. So yes, George Fabian himself, I tried to portray him honestly. He was an egomaniac. He was driven. He was very smart, very charming, but also a bit of a bully. And he had so many diverging personality points that he was an interesting one to capture. And you can still actually take tours of his estate in Illinois today, and they'll talk about all of his different contributions and just a little bit of the unique person he was. So I got to do that as part of my research and would highly recommend it. But yeah, like we were saying, sometimes history is crazier than fiction.
Did you have trouble pulling yourself away from the research?
Oh yeah, I always do. I always do. Like not the nitty-gritty stuff like how does this car engine work or whatever, but when it comes to people's stories, I could do that all day and never get any writing done.
Well, Rosanna, speaking of writing, all four of you are writers, and you share important stories, and you do it in such a way that can get people not just interested, but to really change them and help them learn about history and entertain them. In your book, obviously, it's The Collector of Burned Books, and it's about the Nazi effort to eliminate words, stories. Can you talk about why these words are so powerful and why they're so threatening to groups like the Nazis and the value of protecting the words?
Yeah, absolutely. So I love that books have this kind of dichotomy to them, that in one way they're very safe. Like this is a safe way to encounter new ideas. There's no weapons involved, there's no action involved. It's you and the written word, and you can digest it at your own pace. You can have a conversation, or you can just read it by yourself. And it doesn't have to involve action. But, and this is what the Nazis understood, when you read something, it changes you. Whether you love it or hate it, it changes you. And what we consume becomes what we think, and what we think becomes what we believe, and what we believe becomes what we do. So the Nazis really understood that in order to control a society, they had to control the narrative. And they started this in the early 1930s. And this is when the students actually, who had gone through the Hitler Youth program, were the ones to say, we need to get rid of the books that are bad, that are vulgar, that are degenerate. We need to cleanse them from our universities and our personal libraries. And so it started as students wanting to do this. And the Nazi Party was like, awesome, yeah, let's do that. We're going to get behind this. And so it got to the point where first it was volunteer, let's have a celebration where we burn all these nasty books. And then it became compulsory. And then it became something that the children were told to urge their parents to do. And if not, then tell us that your parents haven't done it, right? And eventually it got to the point where if you have these books in your possession, you can be arrested. But it was a decade-long process. And it starts with, I don't like something. And since I don't want to read it, I don't want anyone to read it. And that's what started this whole country, and eventually most of Europe, down this path where they had to choose whether they were going to obey this dictate to only consume what someone else told them to consume and only think what someone else told them to think. And of course, we know that people fought back. And one of the stories I loved best about this library of burned books was they didn't just collect all the books that had been banned and had been burned. They had this program where they would take these banned books and they would tear the covers off, and they would put other covers on of approved books, and they'd send them back into Germany. So they were like undercover books that had been banned that were sent back in because people still wanted them. And part of human nature is to yearn for the thing that is forbidden, right? Like we want to experience it. As soon as someone says this book's banned, how many of us are like, oh, why? I wonder, let's look into that. I want to read that. So it's a big thing that can go either way. But when you have the entire force of a government behind it, and so many people who really believe that we have to keep trash from our children and from society, it just leads down this road. And it's because words are powerful and they can change people. And when you know that and you want to control it, then you want to control the words. So that's what led to most of the horrors of the Nazi Party is their desire to control every facet of society and control the narrative. And that's what my characters in the Collector Burn books in Paris are really fighting back against.
I wonder if you can talk a little bit more about what that looks like today, because obviously we're still having that discussion. Legislators are arguing whether or not certain books should be allowed in schools and other places. But I imagine it's a little bit different because controlling the narrative is a lot more challenging with how much media is available now compared to the 1940s.
Yeah.
What do you think about even the ability to control the narrative? Is that even possible anymore?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one thing that I researched in this is the history of book burning and book banning. And it's as old as books, right? Like people have always tried to do this. And to lesser degrees and greater degrees, they've had success at it. So we are still seeing it today. We've always seen it. We always will see it because people are always going to want everyone to believe what they believe. No matter what side of any issue you're on, you want everyone to believe what you believe. And so we see it on both sides of the aisle today. We see it from, various viewpoints, but all sorts of people who want to control the narrative, right? They want to say, no, 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 this is good and this is bad. And so it's never probably going to go away. But one thing that I think we just all need to consider is, where do I draw my line? Where do I draw the line between what I want to read and what I want to be able to read and what I believe everyone else should be able to read if they want to? And we do have the technology today where it's difficult, right? It's difficult to totally shut anything down, but we also see that it still works to varying degrees. And they've always found ways to get around things. Like they used to use the mail, and anything going through the mail, well, we can intercept that. And that's, the American government, all sorts of governments have done that. And so today, they might not be able to say what Amazon sells to you, but governments can still have impact on what libraries have. And in especially rural communities, a lot of people depend on libraries. So, and of course, schools, what's in schools and what isn't in schools. So it's a conversation that's never going to stop. But I think what needs to happen is that people need to come to the conversations with questions and with a desire to learn from each other instead of just win. And that's where I think we are today, is everyone just wants to win. They want to win the argument. But as soon as you start an argument, you're going to lose. Like everyone loses in an argument. And what we need to get back to instead is saying, what offends me in this book and why? And what can I learn from that? And how can I have a conversation about it instead of just shutting it down? And why is it important to have that conversation? And who believes it and why? And how can I understand them? So, I don't think we're going to see full-on book bans in the US anytime soon, but I think we do see them a lot in smaller capacities. And it's something that we all need to just sit back and really question of, is this the best way to handle the conversation, or would it maybe be better to actually have a conversation?
Well, such a good message and so well articulated. Thank you so much for talking about that. I've got more questions for our panelists, but I'd like to invite questions from the audience. So if you have a question, just go ahead and post it in the chat and I'll get to as many as I can. I'm also going to repost the link to each one of our panelists' books if you want to go check those out. Madeline, you're a very prolific writer. I'm wondering if you have many starts and stops. Do you come across one story that you think, oh, I have to write about this, and then start writing it, start researching it, and then find yourself going down another path? Or how often does that happen with your stories?
Never. So I like to joke that I'm so type A, I'm 12 point Times New Roman font. And so before I start writing my books, I have huge character development completely compiled. So if a character has more than just a couple of lines in a book, and sometimes even then I still have this, I'll have like a full dossier on these characters where I have like their hopes, their dreams, their entire background, their history growing up, what kind of family issues they had, their traumas, their hopes, their dreams, blah, 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 all that stuff. I've put together a whole comprehensive file, not just on my primary protagonist, but all characters. And then I put together a really, really thorough outline of my book, which usually is about 25% of the length of my entire book. And so I know how many chapters a book is going to be before I even start writing it. And based off of the estimated word count per chapter, I know how long my book is going to be before I even start writing it. And it's so I have everything so by design before I start a book that I can't, it's like I've already pulled the trigger, right? I got to just go with it. And so, but yeah, so I've written over 40 books now. I have over 35 historical romances that are medieval, Regency, and like the 1700s. And I have 4 historical fiction that are World War II. And then, like I said, with this one, it's Victorian.
So you got it down to a science. Um, we've got a lot of questions coming in, so I'll get to those that I can. I don't think we'll be able to get to all of them, but somebody, Madeline, did ask about, you just said you've written 40 novels. Has your process changed? Have you improved as a writer? Are you constantly learning how to do it better?
So I am constantly learning. I actually work with book coaches one-on-one. I do immersions. I'm actually getting my MFA in creative writing right now. I every year I take one major learning opportunity and I just plunge fully into it. So with me, every book that I write is to the best of my ability that I can do at that time, with the hope that the next book that comes out will be even better than the last.
That's a good goal, and I'm amazed to hear you're in graduate school right now with everything that you got going on. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Let's see. I'm just looking through some of the questions. How about Laura asks, how often have you found your next book while you're researching your current one? Anybody that wants to answer that one, feel free.
Every single time. It helps that I stay in kind of the same vague area, but I will often jot down future ideas, put things on the shelf, and then revisit that document later and be like, oh yeah, like forgot about that little detail or that article I found I couldn't use, and it often gives me ideas. I gotta force myself to focus. I have the opposite problem.
We must have a lot of writers in the audience because they have numerous questions about craft and research. Daryl asks, what's the best point of view in historical fiction? And have you read Save the Cat to help you with your structure with your craft? Anyone read that one?
I
I've read it.
use screenwriting to help craft my novels because I want all of them to be movies, even though not a single one has been optioned yet. Although I'm
Yet.
pretty close with 2, but no dice. But yeah, I always try to do like a screenplay type format. And I also use Freytag's pyramid. So you've got your inciting moment, rising action, climax, denouement. Yeah, like the whole thing is loosely structured around that. But yeah, and I am also with Amy, I find one subject from another. It all sort of leads into the next. So
Erika, can you talk more about that? You said 2 have come close. What does that process look like?
well, I've had phone calls with producers or a lot of email exchanges, and the one that got closest was Call Me Zelda, which was about Zelda Fitzgerald's time in Baltimore when she was being treated for schizophrenia. And at that time, the Gatsby movie was out. There were 3 other Zelda novels, so she was having a real moment. And the producer took my pitch to the meeting, and he said, "If we decide to go with it, I'll call you back." And then he didn't call back. So the other ones I've had inquiries pre-publication and post-publication, but never, it never has gotten through. So maybe this one, we'll see.
And then Lara asks about this made me curious. Replenishing your creative inspiration. All of you are professional writers. You're doing it all the time. Before you even publish one book, you're probably starting on the next one. Do you ever find yourself in a lull? How do you replenish the creative juices?
One key thing I think is rest, and we have to be intentional about it. At least I have to be intentional about it. I'm one of those who will just work constantly. But another thing that I've discovered in the last few years is to have a project that's just for fun. If I'm writing a lot, and in the last few years, I've had 4 to 6 novels that I'm turning in. But if I have a project that is not necessary and I can turn to that just in a few down moments when they come, it actually replenishes me to work on the needful projects. So that's a relatively new discovery for me because it felt just weird, right? To work on something I don't have to work on. But I now always have a project going that is just for fun, just for kicks, that I'll work on between other projects here and there.
I try really hard to make time to work out every single day. And for me, it just helps me clear my head. It helps me manage all of my stress. And sometimes I've found that if I'm like having a hard time figuring out a plot point, I can just go for a run and like let my thoughts just unspool. And a lot of times those tangles help to kind of work themselves out. And then also, like Roseanna was saying too, just rest. Even if I'm on deadline and I'm like, this book is due tomorrow, but I'm completely depleted, I will actually just take the rest of the afternoon off, even though I know that I probably can't afford it, and just read because it does help to really refill that creative well.
Mhm.
Madeline, do you ever come up with an idea, like shake something loose while you're exercising, and are you afraid you'll forget it?
Oh no, I usually will actually make a voice memo to myself if I'm running. And if I'm not running, I'll actually stop and like jot it down on a post-it note or like tap it out on my phone or something. So, but I go for a lot of walks in the morning, and I think my neighbors all are used to this by now. I'm usually there like doing voice to text, and I even do it sometimes with writing. And so if somebody's walking past me, you never know if I'm like killing off a character or something going on, that I'm sure sounds pretty nefarious, but I'm always like talking to my phone and kind of like recording a lot of the things that are happening, so that it can come back and piece it all together.
Don't be careful how loud you're speaking. You don't want people to overhear you.
Right, no murders in public.
Now, so, let's see. Renee asks about your story ideas. Do they ever like just sit in the back for a while you're writing other things? What's the longest amount of time a story has just sat and you haven't been able to get to it before you finally find the time and the inspiration to write it?
I think rather than the time and inspiration is publisher interest. I would like to say that every single idea that I've submitted has been complete gold and they've wanted me to publish it. But that's unfortunately not the case. So for me, I have ideas that I've put together and fleshed out that are kind of sitting on the back burner for some particular time period to come back into being popular. And I can be like, oh, I have this idea. In fact, my next book, A Time of Witches, is actually about the witch trials in England. I have been wanting to write that book actually since high school. And all of a sudden, I started seeing all these witch books popping up on Publishers Marketplace. And I was like, oh, I have this book. So I guess that's my longest one. What, like, I guess like almost 30 years.
That's amazing, and that will make your. Is that going to be part of your trip to Salem? You
No,
pre-interview here, we were
yeah,
talking
I'm
about
going to
that.
Salem, but my husband just got that for me because I've always wanted to go.
Okay,
Yeah. But apparently we're doing like a witchy photo shoot and I'm super excited for it.
nice. Christina asks about family support. Amy did reply to that one about her 1 year old. Anyone else want to speak on how your families support what you're working on?
Yeah,
I've been
I've got 3 sons, and they are very good cheerleaders, and they try to come to my book events. We were just talking about next week, and I'm like, oh guys, you don't have to come, and they want to go. So when they're home, it's really awesome now that they're teenagers and young adults. It's a very cool place to be, because when they were little, like Amy's, it was always trying to steal writing time in the middle of the night or nap times. So it's kind of a nicer place to be. And my husband, he's just been wonderful, because he's a numbers guy and I'm a letters girl, and we always joke about it. He just he doesn't understand, but he just supports. So it's lovely.
Oh, well, let's go back to research. There are several questions about it. Amy, you had talked about um, just being so involved in the research and having a hard time to pull yourself away. I guess one question is, what are your research techniques? And then also, how do you know when enough is enough and you've got to write the actual story?
Yeah, you know the theory for people's jobs where they say, you put boulders in first and then you put stones and then you put pebbles in. I try to use the same technique when it comes to research. Like I'll read my big books that are on the general history behind my subject. And then I'll do like specific articles about like, oh, here's what the trolley system in Philadelphia was like. That's the one I'm working on next. Uh, so I have enough knowledge to not make plot problems that would cause me to rewrite multiple chapters. But I will not do the very specific, what types of shoes would this person be wearing, type of research. I'll just leave that in all caps as I'm writing. I'll say insert shoes here or car type here, because otherwise it would take me, I'm already a slow writer. It already takes me a year and a half to write a book. And it would take me so long if I did all of that then. So that's my general idea is big research, specific research, and save the little details for the process of editing.
We have a question from Sarah about path to publishing, independent, waiting on traditional publishing and going through the query process. What are your thoughts on, let's see, in the work of the, how do you decide which avenue to publish? What do you think, not just for yourselves, but for other authors out there, for those that are watching? What are some of the pros and cons of each? How do you make that decision?
So I have actually published with a small press. I've done independent publishing, and I'm now with Hanover Square Press under HarperCollins. So because I've answered, or because I've done all three of them, I mean, for me, the small press was really beneficial because that's how I started in publishing. I feel like they really held my hand through a lot of the marketing aspects that I don't know that I would have been able to grasp on my own. And it was like a nice sort of segue into the publishing world. Eventually, I was writing for Harlequin Historical, and I saw that if I was writing historical romance and self-publishing it, I could make significantly more money, which is why I switched over to self-publishing. So the benefits of self-publishing is that you have control over everything. So if you get a cover and you're like, I don't like this cover, or I don't like the way that this title is, then you can change it because you are the one who gets to do it, but you're also the person who's in charge of everything. So it can be a lot of legwork. And if you don't know how to do a lot of things, it can be a lot of work to kind of learn how to format your book, upload your book, do all of the marketing for your book, etc. And then with the big five, with traditional publishing, obviously some of the benefits are the fact that they do help you with the marketing. They do help out with influencers and kind of getting your foot in the door with a lot of marketing opportunities, and even getting your books into bookstores. I know that now independent books are able to get more into bookstores, but and historically it's been a lot more difficult for, like, with historical fiction, to get into bookstores, and paperback and hardcover oftentimes outsells electronic copies. So that's kind of like my very, very broad, because I mean, we could do like a whole weekend workshop on this and still not cover everything. That's a very, very broad, generalized overview of sort of the pros and cons of those three avenues. And I think to go for what you want, I think that you just need to kind of look at yourself and be honest with yourself about what your goals are as an author and how you think each one of those paths might accomplish that goal for you. And if you want more research on any of this, I would highly recommend going to YouTube, because whatever you want and you have a question about on YouTube, there are 10,000 different channels that will give you all the information that you want.
I think it's a good question just for the fact that it's being asked. Like it's important to be prepared to know what you're in for because there's a little bit of disillusionment with no matter what path that you go down. And I would recommend like Jane Friedman for a trusted source that's in the industry and gives you real honest information about paths to publication. We have a question about reading for fun, and actually, I'm really curious to hear your answers because I never read for fun. I'm
Oh, no.
editing, I am proofreading. And I'm sure all of you have research and writing to do. Do you find time to just read for enjoyment?
Okay, Colin, audiobooks. You need to get some good audiobooks for
Yes, yeah,
yourself. I
yeah,
listen to
definitely.
audiobooks when I'm brushing my teeth. I listen to audiobooks when I'm doing the laundry. I listen to audiobooks when I'm in the car. Even when I used to drive my daughter to the bus stop, I would listen for like 2 minutes onto my audiobook. So audiobooks are 100% the way to go. And I want to do a quick shameless plug for Libro FM. So if you want to make sure that you're listening to audiobooks, but also still supporting independent bookstores, I highly recommend Libro FM. It operates just like Audible and that kind of thing. You can speed up, slow down, whatever you want. It's absolutely fantastic, Libro FM.
I have to always read for pleasure. That's my first love. That's why I wanted to become a writer. So I always make time every night before I go to bed. Sometimes when I eat, I read. I do audiobooks when I'm driving, and I walk every day after I write. So I'll do it then sometimes. But my most recent favorite book is Isola. I think it's Allegra Goodman. That was on all the, I try to read some of the books in historical fiction that really take off on the bestseller list and have staying power. And sometimes I can't figure it out why, and other times I'm like, yes, and that book was spectacular. So I can't recommend it enough.
I definitely noticed. I homeschooled. Mine are graduated now, but so between homeschooling, writing, editing, all that, there were definitely years where if I got one book for fun in a month, I felt like I was doing good. But then as the kids got older, I guess it was a year and a half, 2 years ago, I noticed that I had this inability to sit down with a book. Like 10 minutes and I felt like I had to jump up and do something. So I was doing a lot of audiobooks at that point, but I wanted to rekindle the love of sitting down with the book because this was the first thing, right? Like this is the love. So I'm a competitive with myself person. And so I set myself a reading goal of reading 100 books for fun in the next year. So I did it last year, and then so that was so much fun. I'm gonna do it again this year. So now, like, my husband will come out and be like, "Didn't you just finish a book 2 minutes ago?" I'm like, "Yes, but I had to start another one." He's like, "Why?" I'm like, "Because these 100 books aren't gonna read themselves." So now I feel like what I love about that is that I feel like I have time to read everything, right? Like on the list, it'll get there eventually. But
Amazing. Yeah, I have two little kids, and audiobooks are fantastic. And also, being part of a book club has made me, because usually when I'm listening to an audiobook, I need something a little bit lighter. It's hard for me to focus in the snatches I read it, but my book club will give me the, East of Eden and like hefty classics. And then I get to talk about them with people, which as an extrovert writer is peak for me. So,
Well, I have to push back against Madeline. I do listen to audiobooks. I have the Libby app, which you can get books from the library. I just finished Where the Crawdads Sing, and I multitask. Yes, definitely multitask while I listen to those. Well, we're running up against the clock here. I want to thank our panelists. This has been awesome. All of you have written some amazing historical novels, and I'm so glad we're able to feature them here. Thank you to everyone that has attended and taken time out of your Tuesday to be here to learn about these novelists and their novels. We will end with one more question. Before I get to that, I just want to do a shameless plug. Madeline is attending the History Through Fiction conference. She's one of our special guests. That'll be in March. And all the information for our conference is up on our website, historythroughfiction.com. Madeline, we should talk about maybe doing a little exercise thing. I've been talking with Jillian Forsberg about adding that to the conference. Um, Something that attendees can do maybe before in the
I'm in.
morning.
Yeah,
Awesome.
I would definitely help out with that. That would be fun.
But any of our attendees here today, if you're interested in a historical fiction writing conference in Boston, it's going to be in Beverly, Massachusetts, right near Salem. And that'll be in March of next year. So definitely head to historythroughfiction.com and you'll find it on the top menu, the conference. Well, to close things out, I always ask about the value of historical fiction. I think we've already kind of covered that quite a bit, but maybe if each of you could just articulate briefly why write historical fiction? What is the value of turning history into fiction in order to tell these stories? Madeline, why don't you start us off?
They always say that history repeats itself. So I feel like the more we know about history, the less we have to worry about it repeating itself because knowledge is such power.
Erika, what's the value of historical fiction for you?
For me, it helps me process. If I look at a time past, it helps me process my feelings and opinions about the time that's present. Whether it's reflecting, even when I reflect on my ancestors, someone posted about ancestry. I do a lot of research into my ancestors and look at the singular problems that they faced and what I face and what needs to be worked out. So I think that it's just a continual process of learning about where we've come from to see where we want what the world to look like for our children. So.
Amy, how about you? What's the value of historical fiction?
When I was in high school, I had a history teacher who said, even important people don't change the world. Ideas change the world, and you are the ones who are going to be changing the world because of what you believe and how you live that out. And that stuck with me, and I think the power of story is a huge part of that.
And finally, Roseanna, what's the value of historical fiction for you?
It's no fair to go last. They stole all the great answers. But to just kind of take them all and mash them up into my answer as well, that I love that historical fiction lets us tackle the issues of today at a 45-degree angle, right? Like we don't want to hit things head on because we see them all the time and they are depressing and they are scary. But when you take that just slant and you turn it a little bit, suddenly it's a news story and it's one that is just distant enough that we can approach it. And when we can approach it through the lens of history, we can then come back, take the lessons learned back into today and face today in a better way.
Well, thank you. That's such a wonderful way to put it. Well, thanks again to our panelists. Thanks again to everyone who attended. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day, and I'll see you next month on What's New in Historical Fiction.
Thank you.
Thank you.